Welcome everyone to Silicon Labs Talking Tech podcast. We're happy that you've joined us for another episode. And today we're going to talk about customer support. That's right. All of you are most likely customers of Silicon Labs, or you directly work with customers. So I thought it was perfect to have an expert joining us to give us a different perspective on how customers get supported. So I'm joined by Ryan Orton. Ryan is a field applications engineer at Silicon Labs, and he's based out of Austin, Texas. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Hey, Kyle. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I invited you to the podcast because I think that you can provide a unique perspective that a lot of people don't, understand or they don't have knowledge about. So before we get started, why don't you, I know it was a task to get you to join because you're kind of busy preparing for a trip. What do you have in store for the next couple of weeks?
Hey, yeah. Yeah, my wife and I are going to sneak away to Italy for a little bit. We've been watching the news for a long time now, and it looks like things are finally going to open up to the point that we can make it happen. So, going to sneak away, enjoy some good wine, some good food.
Yeah, I've not been to Italy, but a couple friends of ours have always shared pictures, and it just looks beautiful. I'm sure you and your wife will really enjoy it. So enjoy that.
Yeah, we're very excited.
We started Silicon Labs about the same time, right?
Yeah, I think it's been 6 or 7 years now.
Exactly. And personally, I've enjoyed watching your career take off, Ryan. You've done an amazing job. You're one of the most valuable FAEs at Silicon Labs. And it's not just me saying that. I know all your customers have provided feedback to your managers and to Silicon Labs that you've done a great job. So I think you're a great person to explain why that is, what you do in the field to support customers that work with Silicon Labs. So why don't you start and just do that? Why don't you explain to the listeners what is a field applications engineer, and how does that fit into supporting customers on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, first, appreciate the kind words. The feeling's definitely mutual. You do great work in the training that you put together, and I leverage it all the time. So I appreciate that. And then also a great question. I remember one time you described the FAE role as a kind of spirit guide for the customer. And I've always liked that description. The job responsibilities involve everything from delivering technical presentations in order to, educate our customer base on the new products that we release, to supporting their design efforts. We also support our customer base through manufacturing and the life cycle of their product or whatever they're building. And, I realize I'm speaking in generalities using words like support, but that's just kind of how it goes. Our customer base has a wide range of capabilities. And, my job as an FAE is to fill the gaps in order to make it as easy as possible for them to design with Silicon Labs ICs.
That's a perfect way to describe it, filling the gaps, because sometimes you'll go into a customer, like you say, and they'll know everything. So it's really just pointing them in the direction of a resource that they require. But then you're going to go to another customer who's maybe very, very knowledgeable about one topic, but they're just entering into the spaces that Silicon Labs focuses on. So you fill that gap, and you really help pull them in to accelerate their designs. So that's a good description. Thanks for sharing that.
Right. Yep.
Well, so this is as you said, it's been about 6 years. And so I thought it'd be great just for you to tell the listeners, what's the most enjoyable part of your job? What have you found to be the thing that you get the most reward from?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the best part of my job is getting to see firsthand the cool products that our customer base designs our chips into. I've seen quite the range of products over the years, everything from medical devices to smart home products. I remember one of the first customer visits that I had when I was first getting started was a company that wanted to add wireless control to grow lighting installs. So, you really get to see it all when it comes to the end products that our customer base designs. I also, I like that the job is different every day. Some days I spend a lot of time answering customer questions just through email or phone calls. And then other days I spend a lot of time, actually replicating customer problems or doing hands-on debug efforts. So the variety keeps it fresh and interesting.
For sure. People might not know this, but Ryan, I started off my career as an FAE, and so I remember those days where you go in and one day you're you're working with a variant on nuclear magnetic resonance machines, and the next day you're working on somebody working on water filtration. I mean, it's just such a wide variety. So as an engineer, it's just amazing to be able to, listen in and hear what these people are doing with technology. So it's sort of a commercial for people who have thought about being a field applications engineer. It's extremely rewarding.
Yeah, definitely.
So now, I mean, what is the number one thing that you support customers with? I mean, gets very specific in the sense that I'm sure you wake up on Monday morning and you say, "Man, I know that I have to prepare to provide this for my customers." What's the number one thing that you see from customers for support?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a little bit hard to identify something so specific. And I'm sorry to speak in generalities again, but it's just solving customer problems, and those could be all over the place. But we're talking at the end of the day, usually about our MCUs or wireless SoCs. And so when a customer comes to me with a problem, the first thing that I try to do is replicate that problem, right? So at a fundamental level, the problem is going to be related to either hardware or software. And if the customer can share his or her firmware with us, then we can look at it, run it on our development platforms, and those development platforms are considered to be known good hardware. So if I don't see the same problem as the customer, perhaps we look a little bit closer at their hardware design, look at their schematic, look at their layout. But if I can replicate the issue that the customer describes on our known good platform, then perhaps we dig into the firmware a little bit. So I would say that the most important thing that helps us support our customer base is the ability for the customer to share their design materials and an openness to collaboration and working through problems together. So this means being able to share the schematic, the layout, and the firmware so that we can review, replicate, and then work through the issue.
Yeah, and that's where you provide that differentiated support, right? I mean, it's one thing to have all the resources behind you, but if you can't replicate what the customer's problems are, you're no more valuable than a web browser or person sitting in Austin. You're able to actually go there, work with the customer, use your engineering background to understand what their problem is and then replicate it, because if you can't do that, it's just so difficult to support the customer. So yeah, that is where your engineering degree comes in handy, because you're throwing so many different technical issues. So to be able to straighten them all out, get a clear focus of it, and then replicate it, that's a great service to the customers.
Yep, definitely.
So, talking about the resources, though, that is, we are more valuable than the Google search bar, because as we all know, you put in, it's like, self-prescription for medicine. You put something into Google and you should never trust what you get. The same's true with technology. You could put in uh, the best detail of your question, and you're not going to get exactly what you want, but there are valuable resources out there. So where would you steer customers towards if they want to get up to speed quickly? They have problems with Silicon Labs. So rather than just use Google, what would you suggest they look into?
Yeah, at Silicon Labs, we really do our best to make it as easy as possible for customers to develop with our products. And I would say there's really no point in the design process that our customers should be starting from scratch. So from a hardware perspective, every single chip or product that we make has a development board or some kind of reference design associated with it. And we make the design files for that reference design public. We encourage our customer base to copy these reference designs as closely as possible and to just make tweaks or changes to that design as needed in order to fit their application or their use case, right? We even, for the RF or radio-based development boards, we even take those through regulatory testing so that, our customer base, if they're not RF design engineers, they can just copy that RF portion of those designs and have a high level of confidence that they're going to also pass the regulatory testing the first time. From a software perspective, we also provide extensive example code, right? So in our Silicon Labs GitHub repository, we have a full directory full of peripheral examples which showcase the MCU and wireless SoC peripheral functionality in an isolated manner. You'll also find extensive wireless example code for the many wireless protocols that we support. That's my best advice. If you're attempting to start from scratch, you're likely reinventing the wheel. And if you cannot find the reference design or software example, I encourage you to reach out to your local FAE or salesperson. We've got quite a large team all over the world, as well as distribution partners that can also help or point you in the right direction. And so before you start with a design, be sure to check out, like I said, GitHub, Simplicity Studio, which is our development tool, docs.scilabs.com, which is a central place for all the documentation to support our products. And then, of course, we've got a great community online where someone's probably run into the same issue as what you're facing, so you can get a quick, easy answer there.
Yeah, the reference designs and the example projects are very, very valuable, and that's where we always start when we do our trainings, because usually you're going to run into something in there that you can either review and understand, or to your point, you can literally copy it and get a really good base for your project. And the peripheral examples that you talked about in GitHub, you did a tech talk on that, and it's very nice to be able to just take that base code and have that peripheral work without you trying to totally understand the configuration of it, and what software is required to support it. So a lot of valuable resources, like you mentioned. So don't reinvent the wheels, what you and I are telling the listeners. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, we're running out of time, but I wanted you to maybe highlight one more thing for customers. And then we get this a lot. It's like someone new to Silicon Labs, they start working with our products. What's the process that you would suggest a customer go through? I mean, what are the first steps to get properly set up to receive the support that they need and to get the information that they need? Can you just share what you tell a new customer when you visit them, as if you do these things, myself and Silicon Labs will be able to support you better?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So, a lot of times my interactions with our customer base are more informal, via email or phone calls or in-person visits. But we also have a large team of factory apps engineers, which where I cover our entire suite of products. We have factory engineers that are more dedicated and have great extensive knowledge over specific products or technology. So sometimes support efforts are going to be more involved, and so I think having customers register on scilabs.com gets them access to our online support portal, where they can get a direct line via support case to our factory engineers that can also help them through whatever issue they're facing. So that's a great step. Knowing who your contacts are, your local FAE or your local salesperson or your distribution partner. Like I said, we're all over the world, so there's someone probably not too far from you. And then, of course, download Simplicity Studio. I mentioned that a little bit ago, but Simplicity Studio is our free development tool that includes everything from the editor, the build tools, documentation, reference designs, software examples, and debug tools. So those are the things that I would suggest you get started with to make sure that your design process is as smooth as possible and you get the best support possible.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the one thing, and this is my background, building that relationship with your local distribution and sales team is what I would strongly suggest, because as we talked about earlier, registering for the website, you're going to get the online support and that, but I don't think there's a better way to get through a technical challenge than to have that personal relationship, whether it's through a distribution FAE or a distribution salesperson, or it's a direct Silicon Labs person. That is where as I mentioned at the top of this call, that is where you have built such a strong reputation. Because as we all know, when we dial up some of our services that we have and we get those automated services, when you have a technical issue or when you're running into problems, it is not as comforting as picking up the phone or sending an email to someone who you know. And that's where a field applications engineer like yourself, Ryan, is so valuable. So I would strongly suggest everybody listen to what Ryan has walked through with all these valuable resources. But more importantly, if you are a Silicon Labs customer, take the time, find a distribution partner in your market, learn who they are, establish an introduction, and either work with them or have them introduce you to the Silicon Labs counterpart in the market, because that is where you're really going to get that additional information that you might be missing, because these people are trained. They live it day in, day out. So even if you have all the resources in front of you, you might not know where to find them. So thanks again, Ryan. This has been a great podcast. You did a great job sharing what you know, and I know that the listeners appreciate it as well.
Yeah, definitely glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
Sure, and enjoy your trip to Europe. I know that you and Kayla will love it. But with that, we have run out of time. So I'd like to thank you, but also thank all of our listeners. And until next time, everyone, stay safe.